All right, time to announce the winners of the 2022 weapon design contest. If you're now like, huh, what contest? I wasn't told. That's kind of by design. I only announced it on the Patreon Discord, on my Twitter and Facebook page, and I think in a YouTube community post, which aren't seen as much, in order to limit the number of entries. Because the first time we did this, and I announced it in a video, we got hundreds of entries. I think it was like almost 700 if I remember correctly. This time it was a little bit more manageable. So before we get to the winners, no sponsorship, don't worry. I just want to thank the people who helped make this work, which is Neiot for hosting the contest and doing the organizational heavy lifting, Quinn and Blargedy for helping out with that as well and sifting through the entries. Also, Vaughn and Ace the supervillain for providing prizes, and of course Quinn for agreeing to make a real-life version of the first place winner. So after that is made, it's going to be sent to me for testing, so I can make a video about it. Then it'll be sent onward to the designer, to the winner, who gets to keep it. That's the plan. And the idea was we were looking specifically for something that's creative and original, but still functional. So it was not easy to decide on the three winners. There will also be honorable mentions, but let's just get to it. So the first place winner is Alexander Hoffman for the half pole. So congrats to you. This is the one that will be made and tested and then sent to you. I really like the balance of originality and functionality here, because particularly functionality is very high on this. Some other designs were higher on creativity, but this is going to work perfectly well, I'm pretty sure. Of course, I'm also very interested in trying this out. That's another big factor in the decision making. And this is, it's based on a historical weapon, the halberd, obviously, but it modifies it enough to turn it into something else. Not just by shortening it, which changes the dynamics of the weapon. It's also not just a shortened halberd pole, but the handle is different. It reminds me a little bit of a panabas. And we have different proportions here with the top blade, rather than being just a spike or a fairly short blade. This is basically a sword-sized blade, which is also not double-edged. It has a sharpened false edge here. So that's pretty interesting. The tip is reinforced, as you can see here. Another thing I appreciate is the detail in this design sketch to really let you know exactly how it's supposed to be shaped. All the decisions are smart. I ignored these here because it was one entry only to avoid the issue of multiple entries that can kind of give you multiple chances. So these basically don't exist. I'm not looking at these. This is the design that I'm going with. And yeah, very functional, obviously. You can do a lot of the same things as you can do with a halberd. You can, chop and slash with it, hook with it, thrust, etc., etc. And yeah, this is something different rather than just a short polearm. So yeah, that's why I like it. The langet, by the way, should point that out too. That's a great design as well. And yeah, so that's what we're going with. All right, on to the second place winner, which is Joel Winterholm, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, with the ram wrist. Congrats to you. This is quite a cool design as well. So at first glance, this is similar to a batleth, but it's much more sword-like. And I think this solves some of the issues that the batleth has, even though in and of itself, it's more functional than you might think, as we found out recently. So you can see we've got a fairly conventional, but quite nicely designed, by the way, sword handle here, saber handle, basically. We've got one short quill on here to catch an opponent's weapon, and then we have this blade that goes the entire length. The bottom here forms a knuckle guard, which is quite useful, of course, and then the core of it, or the spine, however you want to look at it, is made of wood, apparently, and has a steel langet as reinforcement. So that means even if this were to be damaged or were to crack or even break, this would likely still hold it together, and this blade would stay in place. The blade is quite a bit narrower than the bat. It's overall not as bulky, so this should save on weight. It's perfectly in line with the grip, so you can thrust with this quite easily. It also seems to be sharpened on the end here, and it has basically a Dane axe blade profile, so that also makes it different. This is really an actual sword axe hybrid. I've mentioned in live streams before that I don't really think such a thing exists, because basically whenever you make it more sword-like or more axe-like, you're pretty much deciding on what it is, because they are mutually exclusive. Either it's top heavy or it's weighted mostly in the hilt. This is definitely functionally a pretty good compromise between the two. One thing I'm a little confused by: why does Lion Dude over here dual wield the things? It looks like a two-handed design very much, but hey, you try telling him that he's using them wrong. It still has the same downside of a batleth, in the sense that you can't change the grip as easily. Like, you can't slide the hand up and down. You would have to, maybe like open it and kind of skip over these attachment parts. You could argue that these could probably be skipped. This may still have enough structural integrity with just these two attachment points, but this is the design, this is what we're going with, and I still like it. So both creative and practical, definitely like that. And also aesthetically, it's quite nice. It's definitely a lot easier on the eyes than the batleth. So yeah, I find it quite appealing. And then the third place winner is Ace the Supervillain with the Keithon Corsair Cuttlefalx and Compass Buckler. Congrats to you. So as you can see, we've got a basket-hilted falx with forward curved blade and edge on the inside. It also seems to have a false edge. And we've got several spikes and hooks here. So for one, that adds some visual flavor, the horns of the skull here. And also, it's useful for catching and manipulating an opponent's weapon. I would have been quite interested in trying this out, but this would be quite a bit more challenging to make. And also with the perpendicular blade to the handle, that could potentially fall under the silly Canadian push dagger ban, even though technically, as long as it doesn't have an edge, it's fine. But yeah, better not to mess with that. Either way, there are also some ideas about using it. Now, those spikes, of course, can get in the way. That's a bit of a concern, as you're moving them together. But of course, you don't have to. You could simply separate them, because with sword and buckler, traditionally going by the 133 fighting manuscript, the purpose of keeping the hands often together was to protect your sword hand with the buckler, because it's pretty exposed. It's just a simple crossguard after all. This already protects your hand perfectly in both hands, so you can easily use those separately, so you don't really have to bring them too close and risk getting entangled here with these extra bits. And of course, Talhofer's buckler also has a bunch of spikiness and weird shapes going on, so yeah, it should be fine. And also, I like about the compass buckler that it has these additional blades or spikes, which I found are quite useful, because they give you a lot more blocking real estate, so to speak, without increasing the overall diameter of the buckler. You can still work with that quite a bit better and have more of a chance of catching an opponent's weapon, even if they decide to feint you out and things like that. So that is certainly useful. And yeah, it's a nice blade here too. definitely interesting. That's the 3 winners, and we also have a bunch of honorable mentions. Let's get to those. This one is an interesting inspiration. The Gatorade bottles, that is pretty funny. So it's a sort of like a sword club. I mean, it's more heavily on the mace side, obviously, but definitely not something I've seen in this sort of way. My one concern would be, it looks like it would be very heavy and somewhat unwieldy, but it's a cool design. This one here is, a hybrid of a tomahawk and a basket hilt, as you can clearly see, which is an interesting concept. It would basically make the whole thing a bit less axe-like in terms of balance, because you would shift the point of balance quite a bit further back with this much metal, which is not a compromise you may want. Like, if you're going to pick an axe to begin with, you probably want it to be more top-heavy for the harder impact. But this is a way to, sort of a compromise between an axe and a sword, balance-wise. So it's more agile, doesn't hit quite as hard, overall heavier. But I quite like the design here. The Native American decorations here. Also the feathers there at the end is a nice touch. A Norse trident. This is a more unique take on the trident, because it's 2 bearded axe blades turned upside down, plus a hewing spear, basically, at the end. So that means there's quite a bit of mass here at the end, so it would be a little bit heavier. But of course, there are plenty of pole arms in history that do have a lot of metal at the end and are kind of heavy. The sheer length and reach typically makes up for that. Then we've got a design based on an African throwing knife, but turned into a pole arm with a crescent blade here, like a Chinese hook sword, and a spike at the end. This was also pretty high on my list. I definitely considered this as well. It was pretty difficult to pick the actual winners, to balancing originality and functionality, and also makeability, technical term. Either way, I like this one a lot as well. So the idea is you can trap an opponent's weapon and control it, and use the spike on the other end. The hand is protected here. It could also be used offensively. Then we've got a pole maquahuit. So this one has steel blades rather than obsidian, which makes it a lot more durable, of course. And the design is quite nice. You've got Aztec-inspired decorations with the feathers here as well. It looks like something they very well might have used, just with different materials. That would work quite nicely, I think. You can thrust with it, of course, but for cutting and probably striking as well with the crossguard here, that would be quite useful. And we've got a mace design, 2-handed with a spike at the end. It's pretty simple in overall shape, but there's something to it. Like, simplicity, of course, has its place, particularly when it comes with high functionality, which this one does. So, perfectly effective shape. There are 2 wrapped handles here to use on either end if you want to use the spike primarily, or the mace. And yeah, this would have also been quite interesting to try out. And yeah, perfectly functional, as long as the mace head isn't too heavy. But you can always make it hollow and things like that, so not a problem. This one here I also considered for 3rd winner. This one is really high on the originality scale. Functionality, not entirely sure. I mean, there's a lot of thought going into this design. Like, this hilt here makes it a lot more useful than it would be without, because this way you can catch an opponent's weapon on the inside, which is why this wavy edge was added, to help trap a weapon. And now this way it can't just hit your hand while it's in there. So that makes sense. It's just trying to catch or block with the outside. That could be a little bit tricky, I think, because weapons could kind of bounce off and go off to the sides. Now, this is sharp. It has an edge here, so it would likely bite into the opponent's edge. So that could still work. Personally, I wouldn't want to use it this way. That just, now you're pointing a sharp edge at yourself and you have it right on your arm. It seems a little bit, you know, daring to say the least. But definitely points for creativity here. It's something very different. How well it would work, it would be interesting to try it out. So here we've got a polearm version of a disc mace, and I like that the disc mace has been made with a larger diameter to allow trapping an opponent's blade. You know, much like the scraper really on the inside. So that makes a lot of sense, and also this way the penetration depth isn't limited as much, because you know, the wider it is, the further it will penetrate before it hits the shaft. Yeah, I know how that sounds. And it's made in this wheel design to not be overly heavy. If you make the entire thing, you know, extra large and solid, it would be rather heavy, of course. And you've got the spike there as well. So yeah, definitely solid, usable. Then we've got this design here, which looks a lot like Indonesian swords that I've seen, and some Filipino perhaps. So it's quite nice, a very complex blade profile here, of course. Not much in the way of hand protection, but a lot of the original historical designs didn't either. And depending on how you use it, if you use it with a shield or, you know, depending on the techniques you use, it's really not necessary. Very nice decorations. Definitely one of the most aesthetically appealing designs here. There's a glaive design. Got the butt spike at the end. You can catch an opponent's weapon in various ways here, of course. And this looks like something that could very well have existed. I mean, maybe it even did in a similar way, because there are a lot of different polearms that existed in history with all kinds of different shapes. So it's quite possible. This one is an unlikely inspiration, not something you would expect, based on a coat hanger. How could you possibly turn a coat hanger into a functional weapon, right? But this is a way to do it, in fact, because now it acts almost like a push dagger, which is, you know, it still has the advantage of being more naturally aligned with your wrist, so you could punch with that pretty powerfully. Thrusts generally would be quite effective with this, but you can also cut with it, and the hook actually would serve to trap an opponent's blade, and it acts as a guard too. So as strange as it is to take a coat hanger as inspiration, this person actually came up with something that is pretty workable. Here we've got a, you know, Swiss saber basically, or curved longsword, however you want to look at it. Like not that unusual. Like the overall shape is, you know, pretty much that Swiss saber, but the design is pretty cool. You've got a guard here, which is very edgy looking stylistically, but you could also strike with it effectively, and this would keep an opponent's blade on there, you know, would prevent or make it less likely for it to bounce or slide off. A very aggressive pommel could also be used for striking, of course. I'm not sure how comfortable the handle would be, but it's quite nice overall. Very aggressive looking design. This one, I love the aesthetics of it. I definitely would like to have a sword like this. It's just not that unusual. You know, it's a long sword with an additional knuckle guard, so nothing that stands out all that much in overall shape, but the artwork is beautiful. I really like the way it's shaped. It's got this sort of Conan Atlantean design here with the ricasso, and it's a beautiful sword. It's really nice overall, and also functional. Same here. This is basically an elvish take on a Kriegsmesser, and yeah, very nicely designed. Green handle scales, of course, appropriately. This quillon is a little bit different, and I like that this hook is added at the end. I don't know if this is for aesthetic reasons or functional reasons, but either way, because this is curved down, what could happen is that an opponent's blade, hits it here, then slides off or bounces off, and then still goes toward you. But this hook can very well catch that at the end. So that's pretty good. The blade shape looks nice. This one here gets points for creativity. I don't know how functional it is, and particularly with regards to structural integrity, how easy it would be to damage. So usually the more complex a design gets, the easier it is to get damaged and for mechanisms to fail and all that. But there's a lot of detail about the intricate little nuances that all this has. Plenty of instructions, so you gotta respect that. There's a sword that would be very suitable for fighting in armor. There are some specialized longsword designs in history that were made with fighting in full plate armor, where you're able to grab the blade because it's unsharpened, or it has like a square cross section, things like that. And then at the end, this is the actual cutting blade. So you've got a triangular cross section here, and then it becomes a cutting blade. You've got these parrying hooks here as well, and a large complex hilt that protects the hand. My one concern in practical terms would be how huge it is. It's 1.90 meters long. Damn, that is extremely long. So and that means you have a huge complex hilt that adds a lot of steel. So that would be pretty heavy overall, I think, but you could probably make this and still be reasonably wieldable. Here's a variation of the khopesh. That's always nice. So the curvature is exaggerated to the point where it becomes like a war pick at the end. And you've got a hook here to, again, trap opponent's weapons. So that would certainly work. You could definitely make this in real life and it would be functional. Looks cool too. Then we have a variation of a bill hook, basically. So you've got a thrusting point here. It's double-edged. Then we've got this perpendicular blade that can act like a war pick for piercing armor or just delivering brutal damage, as we've seen in previous weapon tests. This one's also quite interesting. So you've got a more chopping-oriented sword, like a cleaver, basically, with a nice wide blade here, double-edged. It seems you've got this point here, again, for armor piercing and similar purposes. You can hook with that end, and interesting overall shape. That should work quite well. It would probably handle somewhat similarly to the Armor Slayer that I've tested. So in other words, somewhat heavy and not super agile, but absolutely devastating. Then there's a design that gave me a real headache. Super frustrating because it was my favorite, but it doesn't exist. I would have made this the first place winner if he hadn't withdrawn it. Yeah, he withdrew this design and submitted a different one instead, which is really frustrating because I like this a lot. This is a really good mix of originality and functionality. This is definitely one of the most unique, it's the most unique one that is also perfectly functional in my opinion. And I would have loved to test this out. Let's take a look at the replacement here. I did consider this too. Like it's not a bad design by any means, but it's just not as original. It's basically like a straight double-edged Naginata or modified Yari or. I mean, to be fair, the first place winner is a modified halberd, so, I'm being a little bit subjective here and selective, but yeah, it doesn't strike me as quite as unique. This, on the other hand, has a lot going for it. You can thrust with it, you can use it like a kama or, war scythe sickle kind of deal. It has a sort of, well, not really messer-like, but it has an interesting guard here with extra quillons for more protection. And yeah, balance-wise, it should work pretty well. And it's just a cool design. Why? Why did you have to withdraw it? Anyway, I'm sure you had good reasons. And of course, you can disagree all you want. I'm pretty sure some people would be like, why is this the first place winner? It's all personal preference and taste and this and that and the other. But I had to weigh, I said, originality, functionality, and also how well it can be made in real life and how difficult it would be for Quinn. I didn't want to throw the most complex, crazy thing at him and then be like, yeah, figure it out, bro. So I think this is a very solid choice for something that'll actually get made and tested out. There's also a joke entry, which of course wasn't considered, but yeah, Ace went completely off the rocker with this one. So we have 2 pump action shotguns, the M1897, which are apparently hooked together so that the trigger is tied up, so it's always depressed. So all you have to do to fire, because you can slam fire this one, so all you have to do is just operate the pumps, which seems a total disaster in terms of firearm safety. But hey, the thing is overall obviously a joke entry. It goes way overboard. It's not supposed to be functional or super functional, I'm assuming. You got the 2 tomahawks. Like it's nuts. Anyway, so there you have it. Again, congratulations to the winners. We will contact you and, sort out prizes and all that. Hope everybody else found this interesting as well. A look at all the things that people come up with when prompted. Thanks to everybody who submitted their designs, and thank you for watching. Have a good one.